Beast Wars Megatron doesn't just want to win the war, he wants to own the future. When he steals the golden disc, a record of what's going to happen, he doesn't see knowledge, he sees control. And if you can see the future clearly enough, you can bend reality to match it. And for a while, it almost works. I understand that instinct. For over 3 years, I ran 2 lives at once. A full-time actuarial career by day, a comic shop built in the early mornings, late nights, and stolen weekends. Not instead of the life I had, alongside it. And for a while, the plan felt airtight, until quietly, without drama, reality stopped cooperating. The hardest part wasn't letting go. It was admitting how much I'd given, trying to control something that was never fully mine to control. This is Disassembled Heroes and Villains, and this is the story of Beast Wars Megatron, and what happens when certainty about the future becomes the thing that destroys it. Before Megatron fires a single shot in Beast Wars, he already understands something most leaders never admit. Patience without a plan isn't a strategy. The Predacons have been living as second-class citizens since the end of the Great War. A peace that wasn't really peace at all. Just the ceiling. Installed by the victors, enforced by time, the Tripredacus Council knew this. They were biding their time, waiting for the right moment, calculating from the shadows. Megatron had a different read. The right moment wasn't coming. It had to be made. So he renamed himself after the great destroyer of the Covenant of Primus. He refused to wait to become something. He was declaring what he already was. And then he moved. He stole the golden disc, a maximal relic originally attached to a primitive human spacecraft. To everyone else, it appeared to contain nothing more than location data for a distant energon deposit. That was the cover. Because buried beneath it was something else entirely. A hidden message, encoded on the disc centuries earlier by the original Megatron himself. A contingency plan, a blueprint for traveling back through time to prehistoric Earth, finding the Autobot spacecraft the Ark while its crew lay dormant, accessing it using Teletran 1 codes hidden in the message, and eliminating Optimus Prime before he ever had the chance to become a leader. One decision would rewrite everything. The Council saw Megatron as brilliant but dangerous, too much trouble, too impatient, too certain. And they were right about all 3. He stole a ship, gathered his crew, opened a transwarp portal, and left. Not because the plan was perfect, because waiting felt worse than moving. I understand that feeling. The day I launched my comic shop website, something shifted. The business had been an idea for a long time, a vision I'd carried quietly, but the moment the site went live, it became real. Something I could point to, something that said, this is happening. I felt untouchable. I was certain, like I could finally see how it was going to unfold. That feeling itself is powerful. It's also the moment the trap begins to close, because Megatron certainly doesn't survive first contact with reality intact. They emerge from the transwarp portal and crash. Both ships on an unknown planet, 2 moons hang in the sky. This isn't Earth, or so it seems. The plan is already bending, but Megatron doesn't panic. He surveys, he adapts the immediate strategy while holding the deeper plan close. And then, quietly, secretly, away from his crew, he uses the location data encoded on the Voyager disk to confirm what he suspected. It is Earth, and buried inside a volcano nearby is the Ark. He digs his way in, he stands in front of it, Optimus Prime lays dormant just ahead of him, everything he planned for is right there. And he seals the tunnel shut. He walks away, not because he's changed his mind, but because in that moment, standing in front of the actual enormity of what he's about to do, that certainty starts to waver. The plan that felt airtight from a distance looks different up close. Proverbs 19:21 says, "Many are the plans in a person's heart, but it is the Lord's purpose that prevails." Megatron has more plans in his heart than almost anyone, but standing inside that volcano, staring at the thing he came to do, he feels the weight of what prevailing actually costs. So he seals the Ark and walks away. He'll find another path first. Build more power, reduce the variables, get ahead of the uncertainty before he commits to the irreversible. Because if he's going to rewrite history, he needs to be sure. He needs to be ready. He needs to be in control. And that need, that refusal to move until every variable is accounted for, is where the plan stops being bold, starts becoming something else. Megatron isn't just fighting the Maximals. He's managing everyone around him at the same time. And there's a difference between those two things. Fighting requires strength. Managing requires control. And Megatron never stops doing both. Take Pterosaur. Terrorsaur wants to lead. He challenges Megatron, he schemes, he waits for the moment Megatron looks vulnerable enough to strike, and Megatron knows all of it. He knows because he's watching, because he's always watching. So when Terrorsaur discovers a catch of Super Energon and uses it to temporarily overpower Megatron, Megatron doesn't just survive it, he engineers what comes next. He lets Terrorsaur lead. He puts him in the front, gives him the rope, and watches him fail publicly in front of the entire team. There was no confrontation necessary, no power struggle, just a calculated demonstration that the challenger was never ready. This isn't leadership, it just looks like it from a distance. Then there's Tarantulas. Megatron knows Tarantulas is plotting against him. He knows the spider has his own agenda, his own secrets, his own masters, and he keeps him anyway. Not out of mercy, not out of loyalty, because Tarantulas is useful, and in Megatron's world, useful things stay, until they don't. Before sending Black Arachne on a mission, Megatron pulls Scorponok aside, whispers something privately, out of her hearing. He's already anticipated she might betray him, already positioned to counter, already decided she was a variable to be managed, rather than a soldier to be trusted. Every relationship in the Predacon camp runs through Megatron's calculations first. Every alliance is provisional, every loyalty is contingent, not because he's cruel, because he's certain that the only way to protect the plan is to keep everything under his thumb, and for a while, it works. The Predacons stay in line, the Maximals stay on the back foot, every betrayal is anticipated before it happens, every variable is accounted for, and from the outside, it looks like domination. Control that starts on the battlefield, but doesn't stay there. It expands into decisions, into relationships, into the quiet spaces where trust is supposed to live. I recognize that pattern, not from war, from a comic shop I kept in my office home, built in the margins of life that was already full, because the shop didn't replace my career, it lived alongside it. Early mornings before work, late nights after my family went to bed, weekends that were never really weekends, and somewhere inside all of it, there was a point where I stopped building the business and started managing it. Those are not the same thing. Building has momentum, managing has weight. When you're building decisions like investments, when you're managing every decision feels like load bearing, like if you get this one wrong, the whole structure stops, so you stop delegating. Because no one else understands the full picture. You stop trusting the plan to run itself, because the plan needs you to hold it together. You start watching everything, every number, every order, every customer interaction, not because things are going wrong, but because you're terrified of the moment they do. And slowly, without announcing it, the shop stopped being something I was building and became something I was maintaining, something that only worked because I was standing in the middle of it, holding the weight, managing every variable, keeping every piece from drifting too far out of place. Proverbs 16:9 says, "In their hearts humans plan their course, but the Lord establishes their steps," not as a rebuke of planning, not as a warning against vision, but as a reminder that the outcome was never fully yours to own. You can map the course, you cannot control the steps. In that moment you start believing you can, the plan stops serving you. You start serving it. A team held together by calculation isn't a team, it's an infrastructure. An infrastructure doesn't follow you, it just stands there, waiting for the next load to bear. When everything depends on your control, nothing around you is actually alive, at least not really, because alive things are unpredictable. Alive things make decisions you didn't account for. Alive things have their own reasons for moving. Megatron's crew doesn't follow him out of loyalty. They follow him because he's already anticipated every way they might not. The Predacons are still in line, the Maximals are still being outmaneuvered, and from the outside, it still looks like domination. But underneath, something is already closing. Because the tighter you hold everything together, the less room there is for anything you didn't plan. And the thing Megatron can't plan for is already out there, waiting. By the time Season 2 of Beast Wars ends, Megatron's patience has run out. The Energon wars are grinding on, the Maximals keep surviving, the variables keep refusing to cooperate, and the plan he sealed inside that volcano, the one he walked away from because the cost felt too enormous, starts calling him back. But he doesn't go straight there, at least not yet. First, he tries something smaller. Using the images encoded in the Voyager disk, Megatron identifies a valley on prehistoric Earth. A valley full of early humans, the ancestors of the people who will one day help the Autobots win the Great War. If he can erase them here, before civilization ever forms, he doesn't have to touch the Ark at all. The future changes with the irreversible act. It's cleaner, more controlled. He leads the Predacons to the valley, and Dinobot stops him. One warrior, alone, destroying the Voyager disk with his last remaining strength and sending Megatron into retreat. The safer path is gone. Then the Maximal Council sends an agent. Ravage, a former Decepticon covert operative, arrives to bring Megatron in on charges of violating the Pax Cybertronia. Megatron is captured. He's shackled. The plan appears finished. And then, from inside a holding cell, he plays his final hand. He produces a surviving fragment of the Voyager disk, the piece that still carries G1 Megatron's hidden message. He plays it for Ravage, lets the original Megatron's voice make the argument, and Ravage, a Decepticon to his core, switches sides. Control doesn't always look like force. Sometimes it looks like information deployed at exactly the right moment. And now Megatron walks into the Ark. There's no more alternatives, no more safer paths, no more managing variables from a distance. He stands in front of Optimus Prime, dormant, unaware, and this time, he doesn't walk away. He pulls the trigger. The time storm begins immediately. History starts unraveling, the Maximals outside begin fading from existence, and for one moment, it works. The future bends until Black Arachnia, created from a Maximal protoform and therefore facing her own erasure, uses her access codes to reactivate the Ark's defensive systems. Megatron is thrown clear, history is stabilized, Optimus Prime survives, the plan that was supposed to rewrite everything falls short at the final moment, not because Megatron lacked courage, because he couldn't control the one variable he never accounted for. The people around him had their own reasons to resist. I know what it feels like to keep pushing when the variables stop cooperating. From 2020 to 2023, I ran 2 lives simultaneously, by day and actuary. Models, filings, trend selections, a profession built on precision and predictability, and by night, a comic shop owner, sourcing inventory, packing orders, building a brand from scratch. Early mornings before work, late nights after my family went to bed, weekends weren't rest, they were catch up, and for a while, I made it work. Orders came in consistently, the channel started growing, people recognized Handsome Comics not just as a shop, but as a voice. That was the dream. Not just selling comics, but building something that mattered to people. But the cracks don't announce themselves, they just widen. Margins got tighter, time got tighter, the mental bandwidth never turned off, and the cost stopped being financial. It became time away from my family, the presence I couldn't get back. I told myself it was temporary, that this was the price of building something meaningful, that if I just pushed a little longer, it would break through, but it didn't. In 2023, I closed the shop, and letting go wasn't dramatic, it was quiet. Heavy. Like setting something down that you carried for so long, you'd forgotten what it felt like not to hold it. There was relief in it, but there's also something I had to wrestle with, because I hadn't failed for a lack of effort. I had pushed every variable I could reach, controlled everything within arm's length, and the outcome still didn't cooperate. Isaiah 43:18 says, "Forget the former things. Do not dwell on the past. See, I am doing a new thing." Not as a command to ignore what happened, but as a reminder that God's next chapter rarely looks like a restored version of the one that closed. Megatron can't accept that. Every plan he makes is about recovering something lost, restoring a Decepticon victory that should have happened, returning to a vision of history that never got its chance to exist. And every time reality refuses to cooperate, he reaches further back. He commits to more drastic action, accepts higher costs, because accepting the presence means accepting that his future isn't his to command, and that is the one thing Megatron cannot do. The tragedy isn't that he failed, it's that every failure made him grip harder, instead of letting go. By the time Beast Machines begins, Megatron has stopped fighting for the future. He decided to build it himself. He breaks free from the Maximal shuttle mid-transit, arrives on Cybertron before anyone else, and uses that window of time to maximum effect. He releases a virus across the entire planet. It's not a weapon, it's a filter. It incapacitates the population, strips away resistance, leaves Cybertron silent and compliant, and then he extracts their sparks, one by one. Stores them in a citadel, and converts what's left, the bodies, the shells, into Viacon drones. Mindless, obedient, perfectly controlled variables. No agenda, there's no betrayal, no unpredictability, just function. And Cybertron becomes an infrastructure. This is what total control looks like when it reaches its conclusion. Not a battlefield or negotiation. It's not even a relationship. It's just a system. Optimized, managed, stripped of everything that makes it alive. But Megatron goes further. He doesn't just control the population. He takes 3 of the captured sparks, former allies, former warriors, and buries their identities under shell programs. Rhinox becomes Tanker, Silverbolt becomes Jetstorm, and Waspinator becomes Thrust. They don't disappear. They're still in there somewhere. But what they were It's buried so deep beneath function that it barely matters anymore. Because in a system built for control, identity is a liability. What you feel slows you down, what you remember complicates the mission, what you love creates variables you can't account for. So it gets buried or eliminated. And Megatron believes this is strength, until he looks inward. Because there's something Megatron cannot control: himself. His organic dragon mode keeps emerging, at moments of stress, at moments of rage, at the exact moments he needs to project absolute certainty. The part of him he's been trying to eliminate forces its way back. He doesn't just tolerate this, he dedicates enormous resources to purging it, running experiments, consulting his diagnostic drone obsessively, trying procedures after procedure to remove the organic element from his own body, because the logic is airtight in his mind. If the system requires total control, and something inside him refuses to be controlled, then that something has to go, even if that something is him. It's the moment this thesis becomes undeniable. Megatron isn't just trying to control Cybertron, he's trying to control his own nature, and he's failing at both simultaneously, because the organic part of him that keeps breaking through isn't a flaw. It's the last remaining proof that something alive still exists inside the system. I know what it looks like when control turns inward, when it stops being about managing the business and starts being about managing yourself. During those 3 years, I believed I was doing it for my family. The early mornings, the late nights, the weekends that disappeared into orders and inventory and content. I told myself it was temporary, that presence was something I could give later, that once the plan worked, I'd have more time, more energy, more of myself to offer. But families don't experience your intentions, they experience your absence. And I was absent in ways that didn't show up on a calendar. Sure, I was physically there, but mentally, I was elsewhere. I was running calculations, replaying decisions, trying to solve the next problem before it arrived. There's a verse that speaks directly into that season. Psalm 127:2 says, "In vain you rise early and stay up late, toiling for food to eat, for he grants sleep to those he loves." It's not a condemnation of hard work. It's a warning against anxious striving, against the belief that everything depends on you staying ahead of it, because the people who love you don't need you to solve everything. They need you to be present for something. Megatron can't be present. He's too busy maintaining the system. He's managing the drones, suppressing the generals, fighting the organic parts of himself that keep refusing to disappear. And that's the cost no plan accounts for. Because when control becomes identity, you don't just lose perspective, you lose the ability to perceive anything, whether it be love, rest, that kind of moment that doesn't fit inside a strategy. Megatron's Cybertron is orderly. It's efficient, it's exactly what he designed it to be, and completely empty of anything worth controlling. Because the people are gone, they're not dead, just reduced. To function, to compliance, to whatever fits the design. And that's the moment the system stops being a means to an end, and becomes the end itself. Control wasn't supposed to replace life, it was supposed to protect it. But somewhere along the way, Megatron forgot what he was protecting it for. Before we get into the final part of this story, I want to pause for a second, because if any part of what we just covered hit close to home, the margins you're operating in, the control you're white knuckling, the presence you keep promising yourself you'll give later, you're not alone in that. That's exactly why this show exists. Disassembled Heroes and Villains isn't just about robots or war, it's about the patterns we inherit, and what it costs when we can't let them go. And if you want to keep having this conversation, subscribe. And if you're carrying more than you should right now, I put together a guide called Hang On Superman. It's not motivation nor a productivity system, just an honest tool to help you separate responsibility from anxiety, and figure out what's actually yours to carry. The link is below. Megatron's story doesn't end with a battle. It ends with a declaration. Standing on the bridge of the Nemesis, the ancient Decepticon warship he's raised from the ocean floor, he looks out over Cybertron he has redesigned from the ground up. Every spark collected, every drone compliant, every variable accounted for, and he quotes scripture, not humbly, it's a prophecy about himself. "I am the Alpha and Omega, the beginning and the end, the architect of what was, and the author of what comes next." He believes he's a god. Time itself is now his to command, and in that moment, he believes it completely. It isn't posturing or performance. It's a bot who has sacrificed everything, his allies, his body, his own organic nature, in pursuit of a future he was certain only he could build. And standing on that bridge, it finally feels real. The war is over. Cybertron is his. The future is his. He won. And then the system starts to break. Not all at once, not dramatically, and the places he forgot to seal. The organic life he tries to eliminate keeps returning, Botanica arrives carrying seeds that can grow faster than his drones can contain them. The generals he built from buried identity start remembering who they were. Rhinox, buried under the tank or shell program, resurfaces, starts working against Megatron from the inside, using the same intelligence Megatron recruited him for to dismantle the system Megatron built. And Optimus Primal reconnects with the Oracle, something Megatron can't quantify, he can't model or control. The resistance that follows isn't strategic, it's alive, and live things don't behave like a system. They adapt, persist, they find the cracks Megatron didn't account for, and grow through them. And in the end, Primal doesn't defeat Megatron by building a better plan. He defeats him by releasing control entirely, triggering the reformatting of Cybertron's core, destroying himself and Megatron both, and trusting the outcome to become something beyond either of them. That's what Megatron could never do. Not because he lacked intelligence, and not because he lacked strength, but because he couldn't tell the difference between what was his to steward and what was never his to own. Most men never fight a war over Cybertron, but most men understand the pattern underneath it. The belief that if you plan carefully enough, you work hard enough, sacrifice enough of yourself, you can guarantee the outcome. I still live inside that tension. The career is stable, it's predictable, it provides for my family in ways I don't take lightly, but it's also a ceiling. A system I didn't design that sets boundaries on my time, my energy, and my freedom. And running alongside it, in the early mornings and the late nights, is this channel. It's the same margins, the same stolen hours, but a different approach. Because I've already seen what happens when you try to control the outcome, when the plan becomes something you serve instead of something you use, when presence gets sacrificed on the altar of the future that isn't guaranteed. The shop taught me that, and I'm trying to build differently now. Not with open hands and a passive sense, but with the understanding that my job isn't to control what this becomes. My job is to steward what's in front of me, to show up consistently, to serve the audience honestly, to be present for my family when building something real, and to trust that outcome belongs to something bigger than my ability to manage it. Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Not plans that you design, plans that are already being established. Megatron's tragedy is that he believed the future needed him to build it, that without his intervention, without his control, everything would collapse. But the future doesn't need to be owned. It needs to be walked into, with responsibility and integrity, with the humility to recognize that the outcome was never fully yours to command. That's the shift most men resist, because control feels like strength, and releasing it feels like surrender. But there's a version of strength that doesn't grip, it builds. It shows up. It does work that without demanding the outcome in return. Megatron spent an entire war trying to own the future, and the future was refused. Not because he wasn't capable, because ownership was never on the table. It never is. The question isn't whether you'll have a plan. You should. The question is whether you can hold it loosely enough to let God establish the steps. Megatron never stopped believing he was right, and that's what makes his story so difficult to dismiss. Because he wasn't delusional. He was capable, intelligent, disciplined in ways that most leaders never achieve. He saw further ahead than anyone around him. He planned more carefully, sacrificed more willingly, and held on longer than anyone should have. But holding on was the pattern, because the future he was trying to own kept refusing to be owned. Not because the enemies were stronger, but because life doesn't submit to systems. It finds the cracks. It remembers what was buried. It grows to the places you forget to seal. And every time Megatron tightened his grip, the thing he was gripping slipped further away. That's the cost of certainty without humility. Not a single catastrophic moment, just a slow, steady replacement of everything alive, with everything managed. Until what remains isn't a future worth controlling, it's just a system, running empty, exactly as designed. We open this episode with a simple idea. If you can see the future clearly enough, you can bend reality to match it. Megatron believed that completely, and he was completely wrong. Proverbs 3 says, "Trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways acknowledge him, and he will make your paths straight." Not your plans, your paths. Plans belong to you. Plans are walked together. Megatron never learned to walk. He only ever marched toward a future he designed, for a purpose only he could authorize. And in the end, the future he wanted to own so badly outlasted him. Not because it was stronger, because it was never his to begin with. So let me leave you with the same question the story quietly asked from the beginning. Are you building something or trying to own something? Because those two things feel identical from the inside, and they lead to completely different places. This has been Disassembled Heroes and Villains. Stay deliberate, stay grounded, and as always, stay handsome.